Also they'd have to become familiar with this whole medicine of cannabis and how real that was. And I think that we've seen both of those things come to fruit. And I've always felt that once that groundwork was laid, that once that took place, that this bigger message about cannabis being the tree of life, that it being the cannabosum of the holy oil, that it being such a major part of Jesus' whole agent ministry, that people would be prepared for that. And that time has come now, and the time for these religious cases has come now. And that's what's going to see this thing through.
When we started in 1994, here in Arkansas, we were going on a hope and a golly. It became manifested to us after we put our flesh on the line, how true historically, how true in the spirit, and in practice what we were doing was. We went to court, and the government attorney was jumping up and down and screaming at the judge that he couldn't let other people in the church testify that they had grown the marijuana too. We had the judge pounding his gavel and yelling at the jury, you can't consider the testimony that person just made, when one of our church members would stand up at trial and say, hey, I grew that marijuana too. How come you're not charging me? Now, this is a manifestation of the power of the Spirit. We didn't have all the background, although we had all of the ground that you guys had laid, and I agree that that was important to get us to the position where we could make the commitment individually.
Yeah.
But I'm saying to you, man, you got the ground. Now start acting on it. Ask the power of the Holy Spirit into your life. Ask that all of these truths that you know, that you studied so many years, ask them to be made manifest through your actual flesh. Give the people in Vancouver there an opportunity to gather with you in a prayer ceremony, in a particular place, at a particular time. Initiate the possibility in their life. Give them permission to pray.
It is something I've been thinking about, brother.
I love you, man.
Love you too. God bless.
God bless. One love. Bless.
Well, with me on the line is Brother Jeff Brown of the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church. Now, I should point out that Jeff is no relative of Tom Brown of our church, just share the same last name. But we've all kind of known each other for a long time, at least a decade or more. And I think, yeah, probably me and Jeff, we probably go back to probably 91, 92, somewhere around there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Jeff actually is probably my biggest productive counterpart in the area of the research of the history of cannabis and religion, and definitely a big influence on me in that way. He was a little further ahead of me when I initially started. Jeff had already been doing some research. He had a lot of free time on his hands because he was in jail for 8 years. Isn't that right, Jeff?
Well, I did 8 years, but only 5 inside, so I did have a lot of time to research the issue.
Yeah, and maybe you could tell, because people probably aren't really familiar that much with what happened with the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church. Maybe you could just tell them a little bit about the church, how you were arrested, and what happened with the church members.
Well, we were pretty big around 1980, and we were a church that used marijuana religiously as our sacrament. We said that this was the sacrament that Christ shared with his disciples. And we used to bring our sacrament from Jamaica to the United States, and at some point the government stopped us and busted us, and ended up putting a good number of us in jail. And at that time we raised a religious issue in different courts. Here in Florida, the town case was one of the issues, one of the cases we raised. And in that case, since we were giving it to children and anybody that came to the church, they used that to say that the state had a compelling interest in stopping us from practicing our religion.
The kids had a big part to do with it, I guess. There was, I think, that famous National Geographic picture of the young girls hitting the spliff in the church.
Yeah, we had 60 Minutes did a program, Life, Omni, Science, Rolling Stone, BBC television. We got a lot of publicity.
I'm surprised the Catholic Church has never gotten that kind of coverage for passing out the wine communion to kids, but I guess there's different moral standards at work here.
Interesting. I just I'm raising a case here in Florida now again on the religious issue.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because even after Jeff had spent 5 years in jail and a number of years on probation, his faith inspired him to an act of public protest. Maybe you can tell the people about that a little bit.
Well, that was one day in Tampa at a hemp rally that I actually sat down in front of the cops and fired up my sacramental pipe. And I got arrested, and I told the court that I was making a peace offering in the park that day because the police were trying to shut down the event. Anyway, it went through courts, and I took it as far as I could in the courts, and really didn't get too far with the courts, but the state really pretty much has left me alone after that.
Now, you're still trying to get some sort of religious challenge into the courts, isn't that right?
Well, Florida has their own version of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and I filed a civil suit seeing if this act applied to the sacramental use of my herb here in Florida. But Florida has one clause in there that says nothing in this act will circumvent the provisions of 893, which is the drug laws.
Huh.
So
they were kind of prepared for the Coptic Church. They were already familiar with them, I guess.
I suppose. I don't know if this. Right now, I'm going to the Supreme Court of Florida to see if this is unconstitutional as a denial of equal protection, because all other laws are have the compelling interest challenge. I mean, is this the law dangerous? I mean, can the state accommodate my religious use in any way? See, in Alaska right now, the adults are able to use cannabis in their home. The state says it has no compelling. The courts have said they have no compelling interest in prohibiting that. They say they have a compelling interest in children using it and them selling it and stuff like that, and people driving on it and stuff like that. But as far as adults using it in the privacy of their own home, in Alaska, the courts have said they have no compelling interest. And if I grew a few plants in my home and used it here, I don't see what their compelling interest would be. So hopefully I can get them to recognize that I have a right to a compelling interest test at least.
Now, since your earlier cases, there's been this case in Guam. Now, do you think that's Pharmakeia, is it?
Yeah, Guerrero, as I know his name.
Okay.
Ben Guerrero, he calls himself Pharmakeia too, I think, something like that. Yes, he fought him for 10 years before he got a partial victory that the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act was recognized as being applicable. But they got him for importation.
Yeah.
And they
said it was okay for him to use sacrament within Guam, but not to import it from somewhere else.
Well, that's what they said, but that's even suspect. I mean, because there is a peyote case where a guy was importing it, I think, from Mexico, and the courts ruled that that was all right under the free exercise clause, I think. The churches were able to import wine, And that brings me back to what I was going to say about that. I just argued here in the appellate court of Florida, and one of the judges was trying to be fair. It seemed, at least in the argument, he was saying, he was telling the state that in his church they give wine to kids, and the church and the state doesn't come bust down their doors.
Yeah.